Hello, everyone. Happy 2023. I hope everyone had a wonderful end to their 2022 and a joyful beginning to their 2023. So, one thing that I would love to start is a mini series on art history lectures that I will post weekly here to the studio's page. So, each week will be a different topic, different artist, different subject matter. And to start off 2023, I thought it would be a good um, intro with what I did my thesis on for my master's degree. So I did mine on Redon and particularly his color metamorphosis within his work. But also metamorphosis in different ways in his overall career. So to start off, Raydon was his childhood was pretty isolated. It was not the happiest. He did not have a super happy upbringing, but he was very interested in nature. So there were two people in particular that contributed to that. One of them, his name is Rodolphe Bresden. He was a printmaker and an illustrator. And then there was also Armand Clavaud, and he was more of a scientist, but super interested in nature. And so Redon pulled inspiration from those two individuals with his interest in nature. Now, he started off his career with what he called his noirs. And noir is black in French. And he primarily used black. Black and white were his color palette for the first couple decades of his career. So, for example, this one is called I Balloon. This was created with charcoal, and charcoal was his primary media choice for his noirs, but he did also use black chalk, ink, and in some cases, he did use some white chalk in order to give certain highlights, but typically he used black. Regarding subject matter, he really really loved these weird, suggestive fantasies, loved interactions between plants, animals, and humans. There's a ton of other ones I could have put in here, but in this case, it's called eye balloon. The balloon itself is an eyeball, and then where the basket would be on like a hot air balloon is actually a head on a plate. So super interesting. He really pulled from his imagination. And then he put all of these plants, humans, animals in various forms and in various combinations. So, like I said, charcoal and ink were his primary two media choices. And then keep in mind, this was in a time where Impressionism was taking over, especially France, but eventually taking over Europe. So this was very, very different than what was going on and what was big in France at this time. Impressionists did urban scenes, urban leisure scenes, really focused on mostly the upper class, maybe middle class, typically upper class though. So this is dramatically different than like Monet's water lilies. I have it right here, so I'll show you. So this was Monet's water lilies. This is dramatically different than that. So it was very avant-garde for this point in time in history. He, meaning Redon, and his symbolist contemporaries really rejected their modernism and brought forth a naturalism of the avant-garde and sought to discover contemporary ways to express their individualistic values. So there's no particular style or subject matter that the symbolists used. It was all their own individual preferences and choices, but rejected the modernism that was going on in Europe at this point in time. They were, meaning symbolists, were attracted to detachment. They were attracted to isolation. So in a lot of these, you'll see that, especially in Redon's noirs. And they really did not particularly enjoy the flaneur lifestyle of the Impressionists. So they didn't walk around the streets of France and, paint on a park bench. That was not their style whatsoever. So Redon pulled from his imagination, pulled from his dreams. So they rejected a strong insistence on mimesis, which is like imitation. So instead of painting what was in front of them, they pulled from their dreams. This goes hand in hand with that. So this is a frontispiece for Rebord by Huysmans. And Rebord is against nature, is what it's called. So it goes hand in hand with the symbolists. It is against nature. Redon had a strong relationship with a lot of the literary geniuses at this time, or literary gurus. So Huysmans was one of them, but there's also Charles Baudelaire, Edgar Allan Poe, and Stephen Mallarmé. And he did work for other literary people as well, but this one in particular is for Huysmans. And then going right along, like I said, with the dreams, this is apparition. Gustave Moreau also did an apparition painting. If you want to look that up, I didn't include it in here. But again, here is an instance where he did use some white chalk. You can see right down here at the bottom. I don't think you can see my cursor, but at the bottom on the floor, there's one horizontal tile line that you can see, as well as at the figure's feet on the left-hand side. There are some white highlights. So the haunting, the nightmarish was really, really big for Redon. So I'll go back one. So like I said, charcoal and ink dominated his compositions. He was influenced by Da Vinci, Goya, and Rembrandt. They all were very heavy users of chiaroscuro, and that is intense shading, a really big contrast between light and dark or white and black. So those three primarily used chiaroscuro. Redon pulled from that. He was inspired by that. Redon described charcoal as the mind agent, and he really loved its open-endedness, its malleability, its texture, and its range of depth. So he really preferred charcoal over any other medium during his noir period. And then lastly, I mentioned his name before. His name is Bresden. He was a printmaker that Redon was inspired by, and he also really had these visionary, dreamlike, nature dominated pieces. So he mentored Redon in his adolescence and in his childhood, brought him into his studio, and that's where he learned prints as well as how to draw and take in nature in his own way. So then we have the 1880s, and this is where color starts working its way into Redon's oeuvre. So his transition to color began with this piece in particular. So this is a portrait of his wife, Madame Redon, embroidering, and it's not super colorful. I don't know how it shows on your screen, but there's really just some pastel yellows, oranges, and very light blues in the background. So the figure herself is primarily black, gray, in that noir kind of color palette, but in the background, we have some color starting to seep its way in. So there were approximately 10 years between his deliberate use of black and white to his full-on color. So it was a longer period, but it came pretty quickly in his works. So there's also this theme of darkness and light that we'll see as we trickle our way through his colorful works as well. So I mentioned Bresden and Clavaud, and those two he pulled for his real color. So in this particular piece, we can't really use it, but in this one we can. So he really, in some of his color pieces, utilized color theory in this particular work on the left, not Gauguin's, but in Redon's on the left, we have color theory present in the background use of this pale yellow color and the purple of the trees. So purple and yellow are complementary colors. They're used fairly often together, as are like red and green and blue and orange. Those are all complementary. And he pulled from those two, Clavaud and Bresden, when he used color theory. When he didn't use color theory, that would be his non-mimetic color use. He pulled from Gauguin, who is on the right-hand side here, with his vision after the sermon. So this piece was really, really big in the art world. It brought in that use of non-mimetic color. There's this red landscape of what would normally be the ground. There's this weird tree kind of growing through the middle of it. There's a cow, and then there's these figures that are portrayed in the normal color use. But this red and the green tree, cows, the perspective is really off and weird. So that non-mimetic color use was pulled from Gauguin. So this piece, we can say Gauguin almost inspired in a way with the color use. This is called the Golden Cell. Again, we have complementary colors, but the figure's face is blue, this really rich, deep cobalt blue, and then we have the ochre along its side. And here we also still have that kind of interest in the nature and the metamorphosis between, in and within human nature. We all start off as just one little cell, and then we grow from there. And I think that's what Redon tried to portray here. Jacob Wrestling with the Angel is one of my favorites of Redon's. It's so beautiful. I love the length of it. And then in the middle is just a little detail of Jacob wrestling with the angel. So we can tell he had some biblical interests with Jacob wrestling with the angel, but he also really loved mythology. And that's present here in Andromeda. So Andromeda is a mythological story. I don't really need to go into detail about that here, but you can tell just the fantastical nature of this particular piece. And here we're kind of moving away from that scientific, dreamlike metamorphosis between animals, plants, and people, but we're still in that fantastical nature of mythology. And here's another one of Andromeda. We have a sea monster on the bottom left, and then we have a Pegasus and some waves and other natural instances, but it's still mythological in nature. So then we're moving into butterflies. So butterflies represent Redon's full embrace of color. His noirs, you can imagine, are the caterpillars. That's where he started. It's just his little career. It ended up growing and growing, as caterpillars eat. Think of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, the Eric Carle book. He ate and ate. He took in more symbolist literature, more art that he was inspired by. And then he had this cocoon in the 1880s where he was really starting to understand what his career, what he wanted for his career, what he wanted his art to look like. And then after the 1880s, we have this full embrace of color and super saturated, vibrant, bright colors. And here we have butterflies in 1910. So this is 30 years after that 1880, where he did the embroidery portrait of his wife. We have this full embrace of butterflies. And this one is actually at the DIA in Detroit. You can go see it in person. It's beautiful. It's not very big, but it is so saturated, so vivid with color. And we get into this full embodiment of like the metamorphosis of subject matter from, the combination of plants, animals, and humans. And then we have this in between and with mythological creatures and mythological scenes and biblical scenes. And then we have the real. We have butterflies, and we have portraits and that kind of thing. So there's a full embodiment of a metamorphosis in his color use, in his subject matters, in everything of his career. I just think of it as a huge process of metamorphosis, and I love that about him. And I still, after months and months of reading and writing on him, love his work. So look into it more if you are interested. I'd love to chat with you more about him and his work. I have my thesis. If you ever want to read it, I'd be more than happy to share it. But I hope you enjoyed, and I hope just these little blurbs and mini lectures will help maybe increase your interest in art history. It's one of my biggest passions, and I hope I can share that with you guys. So happy 2023. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.